Hello. Let us resume our lecture and discussion on Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry. In my last lecture, I have completed the particular sections regarding the definition of heroic poetry, the features of heroic poetry, why heroic poetry is needed in the Anglo-Saxon period, and how Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry actually deals with the patterns of life that actually being imposed or that actually being present during the Anglo-Saxon period. So let us go with the texts that are significant and that are considered to be important in the Anglo-Saxon period in detail. You see that under the Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry, there are six major poems. But fundamentally, I should say here that though there are six that actually being considered as examples or typical examples of heroic poetry. But at the same time, we should remember that there are other poems too, where you can find that some hints of heroism is in work. So fundamentally, you will find here Whitseed, Beowulf, Waldair or Waldair, as it being pronounced and spelled, Battle of Brunanburg, Battle of Finnsburg, Battle of Maldon. So these are the six major texts that deal with the matters of heroism, the matters of heroic heart or temperament, and that are considered to be the examples of Anglo-Saxon heroic poetry. The first and foremost is Anglo-Saxon is Whitseed, obviously. As you see that one of the earliest surviving of Anglo-Saxon heroic poems that are dating somewhere around 8th century is this Whitseed. It's an autobiographical record of a Scot, as we see. Whitseed, the name actually indicates a far wanderer or traveler, narrates his travels through the Germanic world and mentions all the rulers he visits. So ultimately, you will find that the range of texts or range of stories to some extent that he is actually describing, it's vast ultimately. So it is not possible probably for a single scope to move by road and maybe by moving ultimately throughout the every part of the world, every corner of the world. Just by walking, it cannot be possible for one to achieve. So that's why you will find that it actually deals with the worlds, and he mentions all the rulers he visits, and some of his character figure in other poems too of this particular period, like Beowulf and Hrothgar. You will find in which there is the reference of Beowulf, there are the references of Hrothgar. So ultimately, what I'm trying to suggest here, what I have to say here, that it can be said to be a true autobiography of a particular scope. Why? Because the time span, as you see, the span of kings that the poem actually covers, it covers his living period to over 200 years. Now, it is not possible for a scope to live 200 years and just move from one particular corner of the country to another. So it is not fundamentally possible. So it might be possible that in the future days, any particular writer or maybe a group of writers had contributed to this structure of this particular poem, that is Whitseed. The second important poem in this particular group, it is Beowulf. Okay, and Beowulf is such important a text that I should deal with Beowulf individually. Okay, that means the story matter of Beowulf, what it actually focuses on, and what are the basic temperaments, that in the so as ancient structure of the poems are concerned, Beowulf is considered as an epic poem. Okay, so I should deal with Beowulf in detail, but here I have to mention Beowulf. You see that Beowulf also holds a special position in Anglo-Saxon literature, as it is not only the single complete epic found, but also nowhere else is the traditional theme presented against a background revealing the culture and society of the Germanic people. You see, it falls into two main parts. That means in Beowulf, you will find two main parts. In the first part, it deals with the visit of Beowulf to the court of King Hrothgar of Denmark to slay the man-eating monster Grendel, okay, and is successful in his job. The second part starts 50 years later when Beowulf, the king of the Geats, fights the last battle of his life against a dragon. It ends with description of Beowulf's funeral. On the surface, Beowulf is a heroic poem celebrating the exploits of a great warrior, one who reflects the ideals of the heroic age. But Beowulf is also a record of marvels with a plenitude of historical elements in it. Towards the end of the Anglo Saxon period, the old heroic note re emerges in two poems dealing with contemporary history. Ultimately, what I have to suggest here that whenever you will go with Beowulf, again, I should mention here that Beowulf will be discussed in detail later. But when you will go with Beowulf, you need to know the epical and non-epical qualities that are present in Beowulf, and at the same time, you have to find that how Beowulf is actually addressing, Beowulf is showing or focusing at representing or rather presenting the life, the patterns of life of the Anglo-Saxon period. So that is a kind of a grand saga, as you can see. And at the same time, you will find that Beowulf was probably rewritten later. Okay, so that's why you will find in Beowulf there are ample provisions of the pagan elements and also the Christian elements to be interfused. So that's why Beowulf is very important, a major text of the Anglo-Saxon period. Okay, the smaller poetry or the smaller poem that falls under this particular group, it is Waldair or Waldair. The spellings are different and so the pronunciations. You see, that's a fragmented poem because it actually comprises of two short fragments that exist in a manuscript of the 10th century. Critics assume that these fragments, totaling 63 lines, could be a part of a larger poem, as you can see, perhaps an epic of 1,000 lines. It could be possible. And while there, as you can see here, the son of a king of Aquitaine was given up to Attila the Hun, the name probably you have heard of, and became one of his generals in his later life because of his power, because of his prowess, to be specific. In this poem, he escapes the Hildegard, a princess of Burgundy, to whom he has been betrothed as a child. They are attacked and wounded. Waldair kills his enemies, but they are somehow able to continue the journey and happily married at the end. So that is significantly the story of Waldair. It's in a nutshell, actually, I have mentioned all these things. If the comments come, if the comments come regarding the detailing of these texts, I will certainly go with them. Okay, the notes have to be mentioned there. The remaining three poems, as the names actually signify, these are Battle of Brunanburg, Battle of Finnsburg, Battle of Malden. These are significantly very important poems, as directly they are described, or they're describing a certain kind of a battle that has actually taken place. So the battles are significantly very important. Why? Because you will find that it actually focuses on the actual story, the actual history, and at the same time the politics, a kind of a clash that is going on between two particular clans and two particular kings. And at the same time, it actually deals with the heroism. And there you can find that whenever the battle is taking place, there are the true warriors who are actually fighting hard. As I mentioned about Macbeth, we have found about the other personalities. So you will find that in the Anglo-Saxon period, there are the battles of Brunanburg, Finnsburg, Malden. These are of historical importance at the same time regarding the history of Anglo-Saxon period, and somehow this will be dealt in detail. Okay, the mentionings have to be there. So today after this, it will be continued in the next lecture. Bye.